Hey friends, and welcome back to the Ugly Duckling House channel. This story is all about a spontaneous project thanks to my neighbor cutting down some trees next door. At first, I thought I would try to save a few pieces for wood carving. But after he told me that I could have the entire log if I wanted, I was inspired to find out if milling this wood was at all possible. I was planning on getting a bunch of voiceovers done today so I could get out some new videos on YouTube and the blog. However, my neighbor is taking out several of his trees, and the machinery and trucks have taken up the entire street to the point where my poor dogs are going bananas, and I don't think I'm going to get any recording done between the buzzing and the cutting down and the noise that comes from all the barking. You guys just left, and here are all the trees that just got taken down, and kind of wishing that I could just take this one with me, you know? I just realized, so I showed you that pile of trees that got cut down, and that one of them was a lighter colored wood. You could see that from the video. That's my neighbor's magnolia tree. It was a giant, beautiful magnolia tree from his front yard, and he's cut it down, and now all I keep thinking is I want that wood. I just want that wood. I want it. I may have to go talk to him later today and ask him if there's a way that I can keep a chunk of it, at least, because I have a chainsaw and I'm ready to go. I've been partnered with Steel for a few years and have a number of their products in the battery-powered line, including a battery-powered chainsaw. I knew that this would be a real challenge to cut such a large thickness that it wasn't designed for, but I'm happy to say that it handled this Magnolia unbelievably well. I've included a few safety tips on this video too because it was such a challenge that it was easy to forget proper technique. I know a lot of my audience includes beginners, so hopefully seeing these incorrect examples first will help you to be safer when using a chainsaw in the future. Safety tip number 1. Hold the front handle with your thumb wrapped around and not the chain break as I'm doing with this first cut. Place your other hand on the back handle and hold them both firmly to keep control during the cut. Safety tip number 2. Don't use the tip of the chainsaw to make cuts, but rather the entire length of the bar. Using the tip in the plane of the cut is a leading cause of kickback, which can jerk the chainsaw back and cut you. Granted, the limitations due to the size of this chainsaw are part of the problem, so using a larger chainsaw for this job would have been ideal. Having chaps, gloves, protective shoes, and a full helmet was important for my comfort level too. As I cut these pieces, I realized that the rest of the log might still go to waste, and it felt more and more wrong to let the rest of it go and be turned into firewood or wood mulch. When my neighbor came out to see my progress, he mentioned that the tree service he used would be coming back in just a day or so. That left me just enough time to research if portable wood milling might be possible to turn the rest of the log into usable live edge slabs, something I'd read about and seen but never done myself. After my cuts were done, I talked to some Facebook groups and found someone who could come out. Oh, guys, that was very hot in this weather because I'm also wearing chainsaw pants. But I got a good chunk of this magnolia tree cut up for myself and in a wheelbarrow, so I'll show you the rest. All of the chunks that I grabbed. This is a huge one, and then there's some smaller ones underneath, so I'm probably going to wind up still trying to cut up that bigger one further once I figure out what I'm actually doing, and then try and seal it all so that it can dry properly, because it still needs probably a little bit more dry time before I can really start cutting it up. But my chainsaw and all my safety gear and everything, it worked out great. It worked out so great. Ideally, a product like Anchor Seal would have been best for sealing these pieces, but I've heard that in a pinch, latex paint can also work to seal the ends of freshly cut wood and slow the drying process. So as a DIYer, I have plenty of latex paint, so I just used a paint sample for the job. Also, since I was using a small chainsaw, these cuts weren't perfectly flat, but that would have been the best option as it creates a nice flat surface to paint. The following Monday morning, I waited for the tree service to arrive and asked them to move the magnolia log into my yard. Kyle wasn't too happy about it potentially ruining the front lawn after all the work we put in this past summer to reseed, but it needed to be in a spot where the sawyer could load it into the mill. Our only option was the street in front of our house, but luckily it didn't wind up impacting the grass at all, in case you're wondering. took a few more weeks to schedule a time for the sawyer to come out, but the day it arrived, I could not have been more excited. First, the log was rolled onto the mill, which then cradles the wood to keep it still during cutting. We wound up using scrap wood as well to help stabilize.
There you go.
The first few passes merely cut down to a flat surface before the real cutting begins. I hung on to every piece, knowing I might make some smaller projects out of these cutoffs.
Can we set up at 2 inches? Can we set up at 2 inches? Okay.
The first few cuts were only about an inch of thickness at a time, but as we got to the center of the tree, Bruce recommended we switch to 2-inch thicknesses for a nicer slab and something that we can plane down later. It would have been nice to also have some thicker cuts than 2 inches, but these cuts were also 14 feet long and extremely heavy, so 2 inches was the maximum Bruce felt comfortable recommending so that we could carry and stack them in the backyard. At one point, part of a limb restricted the saw, so Bruce used a chainsaw to cut off the end. I had to laugh that he, of course, used a steel chainsaw. With the cutting halfway through, the log was then flipped over and the same process continued. Thinner cuts until we got to a flat surface and then 2 inches thick. Once the cuts were complete, we could take in the beauty of some of these slabs. Magnolia has a lot of branches as it grows, leading to those dark spots and a variety of grain patterns. We then took some scrap wood to cut it down to stickers. These are used to separate the slabs when stacking them, allowing for greater airflow. It's important to keep each slab flat and even as possible, so I checked to make sure that all the stickers used in a single layer were the same thickness before putting the next slab on top. The base was also made to be flat and level using 6x6 pressure-treated posts, and a few shims where the slab needed more support. Initially, we thought we were going to cover the entire stack with a tarp, but Bruce recommended to instead cover only the top and add weights to keep it drying flat, so that's exactly what we did. For just a few $100s and some drying time, I think we'll wind up getting a lot of wood to use for future projects. Perhaps we'll even use it for our Ruby's Revival project. In a few months, I'll use a moisture meter to see if the wood is dry enough, which we'll then take to a kiln to finish the drying process. Time will tell how long we'll have to wait, but I've heard it could take up to a year before it's ready for the next step. Stay tuned and subscribe because I'll be sharing that when it's ready. I'd also love to hear your suggestions on what projects to make with these pieces. One of the first, I think, will be a cutting board or a cheese board for our neighbor.